Hello, now I thought let's have a quick talk about politics today. This word seems to conjure up so many negative responses these days amongst every person that perhaps is not in politics. Actually, that's not true. When you tell me about the political environment to politicians, to be honest, they tend to roll their eyes, and it's almost like a word that describes failure, which I suppose is not a good thing, because politics is the very thing that enables society to function. So ideally what you are wanting is politics to be functional. If you hear some dogs in the background, I do apologise. I'll see if I can work that out. So politics today conjures up for many people, unfortunately, horror, it seems. Even if you ask a politician to offer an opinion about politics, their eyes tend to roll, and you're left with a sigh of frustration. Now, politics is very important because it's the way society functions. In a country that operates a democracy, a capitalist democracy. You can also call a capitalist democracy a liberal democracy. I suppose that would mean the same thing, or a dual system politics. You need politics to function, for society to function, the local culture, the cultures and society to function. Having a fragmented political environment or an autocratic political environment isn't really good for anyone. Especially if it's an autocratic political environment, it tends to be very counterproductive, because you're really at the mercy of the political leader's whim. If it's an autocratic dictatorship type of political environment, and sometimes countries have that sort of political environment by accident. It's perhaps not their intention, but in effect what they have is an autocracy disguised as something else. Sometimes they are open about it, that it's a military-led dictatorship with a benevolent, gosh, look at that word, dictator. In theory, I suppose, on paper, if you had an autocracy stroke dictatorship, and that dictator was a very nice person, was highly intelligent, and really had the right people as resources, and the right resources to manage society, a culture and their country, that would be fine, actually. So the reason I mentioned that is because really in this video what I'm talking about is the function of politics, is the function of government. And the reason that I mention politics and government in the same breath is because in context they're really the same thing. What the man in the street is really wanting to do is know that he has somebody in the government that is his representative and will commit themselves to policy and action that benefits the man in the street and society and their cultures. Ultimately, that's what government and politics really is. Now, because a government and politics, well, a government is really a very big, very complicated business. I always like looking at things through a business lens, because so many times the principles and mechanics of business you find operating in everything else, even a person's social life, personal life, in particular in a family. You come across, say, a mum, dad, children. Often you can literally apply the business mechanics of a government to a family. It runs the same. You have politics, you have interested parties, you have fallout, you have a dualistic system. Mum and dad have a different point of view. So the analogy of a government and a family is so, for me, is almost identical, although our government is a lot more complicated because the stuff is more complicated. There are more issues to think about. So what we are wanting to do is know that as a person walking down the street. And so I suppose that let's talk about a Western democratic political environment. So there'll be a right and a left leaning to that political system. For example, in the UK, today we have three kind of dominant parties. Some years there's really only the two dominant parties that are Labour and Conservative, Labour and the Tories. But today Nigel Farage's Reform Party is gaining a lot of popularity. That could be something that goes forward, or it could be something that dies out. History tells you that political parties come in and they wane, they go out, especially if they are personality driven. If there's an individual at the very top that the party really congregates round, and many people will be thinking of other people that might apply to. And so I suppose, so what I'm trying to get to is politics today is very important that society gets it right. I know that sounds obvious, and I know that people will, that they may think, Stephen, that's obvious, come on, we're doing that. My point is we are not doing that. My point is that we are falling into bureaucracy, political bureaucracy continually. Now, if you imagine mum and dad fighting the whole time, and they are always arguing, and one conversation with dad, he tells you have to go left, and then another conversation with mum tells you she has to go right, your allegiance is to sort of both of them, but essentially you want your way and your agenda. So you're thinking to yourself, do I go left with dad and right with mum? Or do I tell them both that I'm in the middle? Or do I tell them both I'm going their way so they favour me? So exactly what happens in a family is exactly what happens in a government. I find that unbelievably so accurate in my own experience. Now, I think the reason why that's a good thing is because whenever you're looking at a complex situation, or you're looking at a system of dynamics, if you can model it in any way, it helps you understand the subject that you're really looking at. So, for example, if you're wanting to understand the government, what I sometimes do is I look at a family first, and I look at all the dynamics in the family, and then I transpose them onto a government. And it tends to give you focus. It tends to identify the dynamics, the interesting dynamics that perhaps you want to focus on to understand what's going on in politics. So this video is really to reiterate that the political environment that we are all subject to in whatever country you are in, ultimately, the man in the street needs to know that their political leaders are doing a very good job. Not just a good job, but you really want to know that your political leaders are doing a very good job. And they, number one, have the country's interests at heart. Number two, cultures and society's interests at heart. And number three, the individual's interests in their heart and motivation. Those are the three things that you want your political leaders to constantly be focused on and to be talking about. And perhaps you want to measure them against the country's needs, society's needs, and the individual's needs. When a leader has those three things under control, they've probably got it right. Anyway, I hope everyone is well, and speak again soon.